I just want to take you guys back to around 140 years ago, which is basically when the education system as we know it was created. And we're still using that to a very large degree in the world. And our businesses, the way that we run our business, are they're built on that education system because we were educated through that system. So incrementally through time, all we ever do is we make things marginally better. We don't actually make something completely new that makes the old model obsolete. So the way that we approach our business is that we are so caught up in basically what we call the outcome, the result. And most businesses spend the large majority of their time looking at the result, analyzing the result, strategizing about the result, and always thinking of different ways of how they can improve it, but yet they're still living in the result. So what this is a way for you to look at your business from a very, very different perspective, which is the other end of the spectrum. Okay, so essentially the way that a business works in today's world is something very, very different at how it's going to look in the future. So I'm going to present a model to you today that's going to show you how a next generation business culture will work, how it operates, what it looks like, and basically how you can actually go and do it yourself. So it's a very different look, it's a very different point of view from what you're used to. There's a lot of information in there, but if you've got any questions, just shout out, and as we go along, we'll get going. All good? Yep. So this is what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to go through a little bit about how happiness is the main driver in productivity in new business. I'm going to show you a system beyond the systems that you typically know. This is something to do with like behavior, language, how we typically look at a business. I'm going to introduce you to the intangibles, which is what we call an invisible part of any organization, any business, and it actually makes up around 80% of a company, yet it's completely overlooked. So some of business in the world have, let's say, a default culture, and within that default culture, sometimes it's very good and sometimes it's very bad, but within that default culture there are things called the intangibles, which we're going to take a look at today, and I'm going to break down what a next generation business culture looks like. So if you guys are all good, we'll get started. Hi there, how are you? So I just want to start with a series of questions, and this is going to get you to think about things in a way that you don't usually do, and it's going to poke around in your brain in a way that you don't usually practice. So, what is culture? What is culture to you? It's a group of organisms. That's a good explanation. Culture, describe it. What is it? If, at the very root of it, the cause, the essence of it, what is it? Habits and behaviors, okay. Can you define culture for me? Okay. Any ideas? Same? Okay. The things that you guys are describing, they're ingredients of culture. That's not what culture is. If you broke it down to the absolute essence, culture is essentially a feeling. That's all it is. And the reason that it's very difficult to describe is because it's something that's invisible. Now, once you start breaking down that feeling, so if I arrive in Spain and you step off the plane, you know you're in Spain. If you do the same thing in France, if you do the same thing in Japan, there's a very specific feeling in every place where you go. If you walk into an organization and it has a very specific culture, you'll feel it. So some of the top organizations in the world have worked so hard in their culture. When you walk in the door, it hits you like a ton of bricks. Yeah. So if we take that feeling, then we start to break that feeling apart. What's in it? These are the ingredients that we spoke about. So first of all, the feeling is made up of behavior and language. Okay? So if I walk around this room today and I start behaving very badly and start throwing chairs around and screaming at everyone, that's going to create a pretty interesting feeling. Whereas if I walk around and I'm very polite to everyone and very nice to everyone, that's going to create a very different kind of feeling again. So the core of the work is basically in these two areas, behavior and language. Okay? Translated into the business world, it's communication and cooperation. And we don't look at it. but these are the core elements of how a business works, but yet it's completely overlooked. We're too busy working out our latest marketing strategy, and it's like when something goes wrong in a business, the instant response is, what did I do wrong? But that's not really what happened. It's how am I being as opposed to what am I doing? And this is the real difference. If you start to look at how you're being, then you can make radical changes very quickly in the outcome of a business. So further into the story, where does the behavior and the language come from? Any ideas? Okay, it's what you believe. What you believe, you say, and you do. So the more you look at this, that we have this very interesting melting pot of belief systems all clashing together in an organization. Everyone has a different set of beliefs based on their upbringing, their traditions, their backgrounds, the way that people come together, their original culture. So you've got all of this trying to mesh together in a way to produce a result. But it's like my greatest sort of an analogy is a football team. Premier League football in the UK, they spend hundreds of millions of pounds putting a team together and they can't score a goal because of their egos, because of their backgrounds, their cultures. All the team players are from different parts of the world, but they don't seem to be able to gel. They're all operating in a different vibration. So where do the beliefs come from? If you really break it down to its essence, and this is really where it gets interesting. They come from the values of the individual. So if you're going to change anything inside an organization, you really need to change the alignment around a set of values that everyone can agree on. And once you've done this, every single thing that ever happens in the company from that day forward is predetermined because it's based on a set of values. Does it live up to the values? Does it match the values? Is it in alignment with the values? And it creates ease in the company as long as everyone is practicing and living and embodying those values. So, where do the values come from? If you then start to understand you've got some control over them. If you're going to change anything first in any facilitation of any kind of change anywhere in the world, whether it's a person, a team, an organization, a community, a society, in a government, globally, you have to change the mind. If you can't change the mind, you can't change anything. So mindset is where the work starts. Yeah, you get into the mindset of everyone and you open them up to new ideas, to new possibilities, to new direction. Basically what we do over time, when someone tells you something, especially when you're younger, and you instantly believe it, you take it on board and you keep it as a belief. And it becomes a very fixed idea. So it creates what's called a fixed mindset. Okay? What we're trying to do is, if you're going to change anything, you need to remain like a child. You need to remain open to constant new ideas and possibilities all of the time. So part of the work that I do with myself is I'm always trying to prove myself wrong with everything. And I'm talking myself out of my beliefs all of the time because they're very slow. A belief system is very slow to operate and to get installed. So if you kind of get out of the way of like having a tentative agreement with any of the beliefs, you get flow very quickly. So that's how we change a culture. You change the mindset, you change the values, you change the belief system, the behavior and language changes along with it, and therefore the feeling. So you're operating in a different way. So just to give you guys a different way to look at it, of an explanation that would make sense, I want you to imagine a game of rugby. Yeah? If anybody knows anything about rugby, it's a relatively complicated game. There's a lot of rules, a lot of things that we have to do. So, same game, yeah? In a game is broken down, it has elements, yeah? Like the field, the goals, the ball, so the crowd, the players, etc. And then the rules decide how that game is operated, okay? But it also creates a feeling. So essentially, culture transformation, it's exactly the same game with exactly the same elements, the same players, the same everything. You go in and you change the rules to become more efficient. So the feeling is better, right? If you put efficiency in an organization, you create ease and you create fun and you create humor and positivity and enthusiasm and all that good stuff. And you bring integrity and ethics and morals back into the game and you bring energy towards all of that, everything just begins to work. You don't actually need to plan it. So we're going to take a look at the difference between a mechanism and an organism in terms of how a company operates. So the more that you zoom in on a company, the way that we run everything is kind of the wrong way around. So let's take a look. Culture is essentially, as we know it, defined by someone else. We live in a world that was made up by someone else with somebody else's rules and somebody else's structures. And basically, if you go in any direction, there's not one industry that I can think of that's really working, as it were. Yeah, the world is dysfunctional because we're busy trying to mechanize everything. We're not letting it flow. We're not letting people be who they are. So the idea is, with culture, it's not something you go and make. It's something that you allow. Yeah, but yet you need to get out of the way of it. You need to stop trying to control everything. So if you think about something, we're so caught up in the business, right? So we are so focused on the environment. The environment, and I'm not talking about the environment as in the environment in terms of the environmental movement, but more about the immediate environment. That's what we're caught up in. What's happening? What's going on? But yet it's the furthest away point from actually being able to make any kind of fundamental change. So we live in like a reactional based world. Yeah, something happens, and then we react to it, and we go and try and fix it. So we're running from one problem to another, basically putting out fire after fire after fire after fire, because we are so caught up with the environment. The second that you begin to break that down and go as far as you can, it comes down to the mindsets of the leaders, yeah, and how they behave, what they do every day. Once you go to that area, any change that you make at that level, it impacts everything else, all the way through the company, instead of like trying to fix the environment. It's kind of like what's going on in the world. If you look at the state of the environment, you can go onto the beach and clean it up if you want, but you're busy just reacting to the environment. What's causing it? What's causing the trash? Where's it coming from? Yeah, if you go there and you change that, then within a few years there's no trash. We do everything in terms of this reactional based idea of like trying to fix things. Yeah, and that doesn't work. So if we go to its source, and I'll introduce you to the 3 different indicators in the middle of the presentation, but if you go to its source, you can make radical changes very quickly in any business at any time. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about my crazy story. I ended up like traveling for the last 20 plus years around the world, working in lots and lots of different industries, and I really enjoy change. I like moving, I like living in different places, like moving houses like a hobby, because I like change. And one of the things that kept popping up everywhere that I went, each industry had exactly the same argument, which was all the problems in this industry are so industry specific. And I was going, that's really weird. Not only did they say it's industry specific, but the actual thing that they say specific is in every industry. Now, if you really think about that, name one thing that's specific to each industry in the world. People. That's the only thing that's industry specific. There's people in every single industry. So when you break it down, it's all about people. We're so caught up in busy with our plans and our schemes and our how-to guides and all the rest of it. But if you break it down as far as you can, at the base of every company, at the base of every society, at the base of everything, is people. And yet it's the thing that's neglected, overlooked, exploited, and used as resources and so on and so forth. Minimum wage, you name it. But if you really looked at it in the right way, they're the most important asset that we have. They're the ones that are creating everything that we are. The state of the planet is based in the people. So I decided to get involved with organizational development and Barrett and the whole story to see if I could make a change. And I realized that there was a lot of, I guess, dogma that was floating around at the time. And they have a set of tools which can be used to go into an organization and kind of measure the psychology of a company. Yeah, you look at the health of the psychology of a company in terms of how it's operating. The two primary things about whether or not you're making decisions in self-interest or whether you're making decisions based in the common good of the planet or the well-being of everyone in the decision. So I find a lot of businesses that we work with, that we deal with, like literally from the get-go, what they're doing is they're constantly making decisions in self-interest. So we call this contraction. Any decision that you make in your life that's good for you and not good for the other person will come back in the form of contraction. In a business, it means you're dying. If you make decisions based in the common good, this is called expansive decision making. And what you'll find is your company grows because your reputation grows and the feedback grows and the things that people do every day towards your business, they'll talk about it in a good way, in a good light. They'll share the word of mouth and your business will grow. But people, because they want to try and get the best deal now today, they can't see the longevity. So it's very short-term focus. So I've sort of narrowed that kind of list down from before of running around the world to a few things that I think are really valuable in what I'm doing right now, as opposed to being caught up in many different industries. And the work is going really well. Like we're slowly moving out into different countries, and like it's started to get a lot of traction here. And we've got some interest from some pretty big organizations in what we're doing. So Barrett is part of the work, and the other part of the work has been developed just over a lifetime of making as many mistakes as possible. So if you think about it logically, there's two things that I can share with you that will make a difference. There's one skill that you can learn in your entire life that will be the single most important skill for your whole life. Do you know what that is? It's decision making. Because your life is just one long trail of decisions. So if you're not very good at that, you're screwed. Right? If you can get really good at making good decisions consistently for a long time, you might actually get somewhere. But we don't. We get so caught up in everything else and get distracted by everything else. All of the small decisions that you make every day really add up to a really big story. It's called life. Right? And if you don't get a handle on those small decisions and you don't become conscious of them, the ramifications of that, they come back and life will keep telling you that you're making bad decisions. So where do good decisions come from? Lots of bad ones. And then you practice and you get kind of good at navigating everything and things start to make sense more and more. Business is not about making one massive decision really good or really bad. It's about making a series of decisions consistently that are very small for a long period of time, and then you'll kind of get a handle on it. So I hope you're in here somewhere along the line, one of those people. You'll get a lot out of this. There's a lot of information in here. There's a lot of different looks at things, a lot of different points of view. These are three main areas that I'm going to cover. The intangibles of your business, like trust. It's a really interesting word that we don't understand, and why values are so important in an organization. So I'm sure you've heard this, like happiness is the new productivity. Now, again, if you're going to learn anything, or you're going to do anything, or you're going to change anything, you need to know where it came from. So I'm going to go back to probably 1950. All right. So since 1950, like when commerce really started to come alive and things began to change, the world's level of productivity globally, across every country, has dropped consistently since 1950. Every year. There was a small spike in the 80s. But it's despite the internet, despite technology, collaboration tools, mobile phones, digital media, social media, so on and so forth, it's consistently dropped every year to the point where it's in what we call a productivity crisis. Why? Any ideas? Well, as business has grown, like businesses the size of Facebook didn't exist in the 50s. So as the size of the companies grow, so does its complexity, right? And we've expanded into this world where we live in this world of efficiency. The strive for efficiency, we want to be efficient. But our need for accountability, clarity, and measurement have become so counterproductive that all we're doing is we're living there. So an analysis shows by Boston Consulting Group, a guy called Yves Moyer, that companies spend roughly between 40 and 80% of their time wasting their time. Right? Doing absolutely nothing. talking about work but not actually doing any, right? That's pretty much where the world's at. You wonder why everything's going backwards. So how do you get out of that? How do you get out of that spiral, right? So in terms of like trying to fix what's there, it's an impossible task. But if you make something completely new and you make that thing obsolete and this thing works, you're kind of off and running. So trying to get it out of the complexity has been a bit of a challenge. So the evolution of business has kind of grown up in what we call a blame culture. So the main focus in that world of efficiency is not about success. The focus is definitely not about success. It's knowing who to blame when something goes wrong. That's really what it is. It's like emails, for example. It was an amazing invention, but they completely messed it up. So what are emails for? What do you think they're for? You think they're for communicating? Right. They use, basically, I sent the email, I sent it, look, that's all it's for. And they go through this process of collecting emails internally in companies. One person will send 80 to 150 emails per day to make sure that they're accountable, that they did actually do the things that they said that they did. Now, the dude that he sent the emails to is sitting next to him, right? So the communications, it doesn't exist anymore. And things like the energy levels in an organization, like people don't understand also when you send these emails, depending on what frame of mind that you're in when you send them, what conversation that you had before you sent the mails, how much energy you have when you send the emails will determine whether or not it creates more work or less work. But companies don't pay attention to things like that. They're just busy plowing through emails. They get up in the morning, tired, cup of coffee, hungover, send a load of emails, be pissed off, lash out at everyone, and more comes back. If you send emails at like an energetic point in the day where you're really on fire and you're alert and you're awake and you're crisp and you're clear, what you'll find over time is that you get less emails, or to the point where you don't get any at all, because everything begins to work. But that's a far off shot. So here's the interesting part. This scenario is so bad where organizations are stuck in survival. So there'll be a company that makes 10 billion a year, and their decision making is constantly self-interest, even to the point where they blatantly know that the things that they're doing are damaging the environment in a huge way. But because it's to their gain, they'll continue doing it. Rather than, let's say, if I'm an oil company, like one of the conversations that I've had recently with someone like that is, we need to be able to compete with the green sector or the sustainable sector. And I goes, why don't you just go and buy a sustainable company and stop selling oil with all the money that you have? The logical thing to do would be just go and invest in green, open a solar field, I don't know, buy an island and do something like that. But they think that they're so attached to doing what they're doing and scared to make the change that they'll just continue ruining the environment, living in fear, operating in self-interest and messing things up. Whereas the logical answer is just a move. So if you start to focus on the people as opposed to what the company is doing, purely on the people, and you start improving their lives, you start improving their health, you start improving their well-being, you start improving their lifestyles, you look at their relationships, their families. How good is their relationship with their mother, their father, their brother, their sister, their wife, their spouses, their relationships? And you really start to look at that and help them improve those scenarios. What they've found is productivity goes up without actually training them to do anything. You don't need to put a training program in how to put cups and plates down. So one of the clients that I had in Bali was at the beginning when I first met him, and I said, look, I'll show you how I can get your team members to dress the table better than you can without training them on it. And he was like, are you mad? But if you work with the energy levels of the team and you make them more awake and you get them healthier and brighter and happier, they're more engaged with their work. So they automatically find better ways of doing the same thing. This is called innovation. They're looking for better ways for doing it. Instead of being trapped in their mind and unhappy and tired and depressed and pissed off with life, they won't do their job remotely well. So it's a radical shift in focus. But basically, the larger part of the story is like the happiness levels of your team or your staff or the people working in the organization directly relate to how productive they are. So at the very beginning, when I walked through the culture story, like, we're so caught up in systems and processes and all of this kind of stuff. And it's like when a client says to me, "How are you going to change the culture?" And I says, "I have no idea, but I know it's going to work." It's a hard sell because there is no how. It's just you kind of line it up, you roll the ball out, and hope for the best that it hits the pins down at the bottom. And usually it does, but you need a lot of faith. But people are so caught up with a plan. I need a plan and I need a thing. The only thing about a plan is you're guaranteeing failure if you create a plan, because there's so many moving parts. A plan 50 years ago, maybe. 40 years ago, maybe. Today, very unlikely. The amount of people, the amount of things, the amount of technologies, the amount of days, times, meetings, and you think that a plan is going to work, a model will work, something that lives in the now, you can move forward with that. But if you think about what is the system in any company, what's the most important system in a company? What do you think that is? If you could identify all the different industries in the world, and if there was one system inside an organization that you think was the most important system, what would that be? The collaboration tool? Asana? How you entreat? Well, the people are the system. Yeah, if you can understand that, you can break down in different degrees what that system is and what it does. So we're so caught up, like, from our own beliefs and society's beliefs or what are put on us, it creates limits. So I want you to think about something. If someone has got a fixed set of ideas about anything, that person will become unhealthy. Okay? They'll just become unhealthy because this is what they believe. If they believe that they're sick and tired and are dying, then that's exactly what they are. And if you believe that you're not, then you won't be. So if you think about any fixed idea for anything, it creates decay or dysfunction or entropy. Whereas if you look at an organism, the common thread between all the organisms in the world is what? They're designed to thrive. Why? Because nothing's fixed. So we have developed this very mechanical way of doing things. Like a standard operating procedure, we think is a system. It's an organizational tool, right? Our education system is not an education system. It's an organizational tool. It's just to get people organized to do what we want. But if you think about a paradigm shift for you, about what an organization should actually be in terms of either a mechanism or an organism, which one do you think that's got the most chance of actually surviving? The more mechanical things become, the slower they are. Yeah, but an organism can adapt, it can grow, it can do anything that it wants based on its environment. It's allowed to change. How do you think evolution got along for so well? If a company is allowed to be what it actually is, it can evolve in a way that it will thrive. But we don't. We put these fixed rules and these fixed ideas in place, and these systems and processes and all this stuff, and basically all you're doing is you're putting a person in prison not to become who they are and not to become anywhere remotely healthy, because they don't want to do half the stuff that they do every day. If you can remove those barriers and put in a set of values where everyone can align around that are actually good and are going to bring good energy, good ideas, enthusiasm, positivity, authenticity, all that really good stuff into an organization, it'll automatically thrive. It'll find new ways of doing it. If you leave the environment alone for 1 year and you took all the humans off the planet, what do you think would happen? It would find a way to heal itself. Okay? We are part of that system. We are part of that organism. So because we are told what to do, we are controlled what to do, we can't be the organism. That's why we become unhealthy. Instead, you need to step back from your business and allow the change. Allow things to unfold in a way that you're not used to, rather than trying to control everything. It takes a bit of time. So, within that system of people, the two primary ingredients to any business of any size, anywhere in the world, the two ingredients for success are communication and cooperation. Without those, nothing works. I don't care how good your software is. I don't care how big your team is. I don't care any of that stuff. If you don't have the cooperation and the communication down pat, and this is something that you evolve, this is something that you create. I'm talking about you get rid of all the language in an organization that limits in any way. That makes the person feel bad in any way. Like mistake. It's not called mistake. It's an area of innovation. Sounds like, do you want to come to the P&L meeting about the profit and loss? Or do you want to come to an area of innovation meeting or an achievement realization or whatever language you want to use to make it be more interesting and it'll have less impact? Like we usually say, let's have a briefing, let's have a debrief. We say, let's have an outlook, let's have an achievement report. It creates a different energy, a different feeling by changing just the language inside the organization. You say, okay, don't say those things anymore. How do you want to be spoken to? Hey guys, I found some things that we need to innovate, rather than you guys fucked up again. The energy around it will change how people feel every single day. The feeling is what we're trying to cultivate. The behavior you can program in terms of good behaviors rather than it be controlling. As in, you want to let people become better versions of themselves by focusing on meditation, by focusing on these are a behavior. Every morning, wake up in the morning and meditate. There's a good behavior. Boom. Is that trying to control someone or is that making it better? Go to the gym twice a week. Eat healthier food. Like really get into their behaviors, how they look at themselves every day, and things will change. Instead of trying to create a new plan, typically businesses, when they want to raise the bottom line or they want to increase profit or do something like that, they come in and they make all these elaborate plans, but the people are the ones that are going to execute them at the end of the day. And if they're still the same set of people, it doesn't matter how good your plan is or your strategy or whatever it is, you're doomed. So these are the two areas that really need to be focused on. Like, number one, just before I go any further, if you're struggling financially in a company, or if you're a startup, yeah, communication impacts every other facet of the business, every facet. So if you work on just that one point, your business will make more money. It will produce more revenue. It'll produce more clients. It'll produce more everything. Because the quality of that communication spills out to where? The market. Instantly spills out to the market. If you've got terrible communication inside, then God help you with the external world. If you begin to focus on this stuff, instead of running around going from one set of problems to the next, I've called this symptomatic management. All you're doing is running around managing symptoms. Yeah, you can't get anywhere by managing symptoms. Like it's like a doctor gives you an aspirin for a headache. What have you really fixed? Nothing. We need to find what the cause of this is. So the other end of the spectrum is where we really need to go. So the intangible costs in a business are the values, beliefs, behaviors, language, all of that kind of stuff. We call this the emotional sphere. Okay? If this is not being looked at, if it's not being addressed, your business is hemorrhaging money all over the place. Okay, so it comes out in things like frustration, lack of enthusiasm, etc., etc. If this is not being taken care of, like we can calculate down to the dollar using this tool, no matter the size of the organization, how much money an organization is losing to how people feel to the dollar. This is how accurate it's become in today's world. So if you guys want to think about this in a different way, the outcome is where everyone lives. Goals, incomes, like number of seats, bums on seats, people coming in at the restaurant, all the turnover, etc., etc. This is where we live. Most companies spend the large majority of their time working on the outcome. There are some smarter companies in the world, productivity and efficiency. We look at this stuff and we devise strategies around making people more productive, making them more efficient, streamlining SOPs, and so on and so forth. But it's still relatively ineffective because what can you tell from the outcome? We're either doing really well or we're doing really bad. The output, what can you really tell? Like, okay, happiness is even in the output. The cause of what we call a causal indicator is essentially where all the magic is happening. Because if you make one fundamental change at cause level, it impacts the output and the outcome automatically. The entire story. So I'll give you an example. Like communication is at the cause level. If you've got poor communication, it means you've got poor communication and got every dimension of the business. So if I go into a company and they say, okay, like, we are really in trouble, this is happening, I'll do one workshop on communication about how to communicate in a better way, or the best one is how to do effective meetings. And you do an effective meeting, what happens is it impacts all dimensions of the business, and suddenly, like voodoo, it starts to make money. And people go, wow, how did that work? Because you're impacting cause level. So the ramifications look something like this. We are so caught up in here. 40 to 80% of the time is spent doing ineffective tasks. So in a restaurant, you have service, okay? Across the entire restaurant. I'm talking a 500-seat restaurant, okay? Bring in a training guy to show them how to do better service. You're at the outcome. You're at the output. It's ineffective. But if you take the same 500 staff, all the waiters, the waitresses, and whatever else for that restaurant, and you bring in a trainer and you make them healthier, you make them meditate, you make them do things that are better for their well-being, what you'll find is they serve better automatically because they're brighter, they're sharper, they've got more IQ, they're more conscious, they're more awake, they're more alert. They come to work with better energy. They even communicate better together. All of this stuff. So the more energy your team has got or you have got, the better your performance is. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to run the world 100-meter sprint after a hangover. It's not going to happen. How good do you think your team's performance is if everyone's getting drunk every night and coming into work with like red shot, bloodshot eyes and trying to do their job? So the clearer and the type of team that you want to put around you is people who are into well-being, people who want to grow, people who like a challenge, people who like to step up, who want to learn. So you want to create an organization of growth as opposed to things. So the shift I was looking for is, what do you think the main problem is in the world with business at large, right across the entire world, whether it's finance, banking, so on and so forth, is we've created, like even charities, we've created this monster which is called a financial system. So I'm going to use Africa as a really good example for this one. I don't know what the number is, but it's hundreds of billions of dollars of charity going to Africa every year. And what does it solve? Nothing. So let's say, for example, I wanted to develop Ghana. I'm going to develop Ghana, and then I've got an investor. He says, right, stick the money in, and let's build all of this stuff, and amazing houses and apartments, and yet then they off and running it goes. Within 1 year, it's a mess again. Why? The people are still the same. You stick a portion of that money and you get rid of the financial system at large. So I'm talking about everything down to a cafe, to a multinational organization becomes what? An education system, right? You educate everyone, everywhere, all of the time, everywhere on the planet. So what happens is the staff in this cafe, every week they learn something new. They educate something new. Where do they go? They go home. What do? They pass on that education to their parents, their family, their village. This is how you change the world. You create an education system, not a financial system. All of the time, it's a running stream. It's a continuous flow of learning. You don't come out of university and stop. You continue to learn. You put that type of education system into every single business in the world where it's mandatory that 5 hours a week is spent learning for every individual in that organization, and it will transform the society around the businesses that surround it. But you've got to go to this level, the mindset, the values, and the beliefs of the people in the organization. Once you start doing this, change happens rapidly, radically. But we don't. We're too busy. Let's get some more money. Let's show them how to put these plates and cups out. And we continue with this way that we do business. And it's not even interesting. After 2-3 years of working in the same industry, it becomes boring. So if you think about it in a different way, if everyone in the organization is learning and growing, what do you think the organization is doing? Learning and growing. But we don't. We expect, well, I see hotels, I see multinational organizations, I see oil companies, I see all of these people, and they've got this team in there, and they haven't learned anything for 20 years, and they go, we don't understand why we can't grow. We don't understand why we can't meet new targets, why we can't gain a competitive advantage, why we can't grow. Because the team are stuck. They haven't learned anything new. The way that you grow a company is by introducing new levels of consciousness into the business, because you can't solve a problem at the level it was created. And we create many problems at the level we're at. So, has anybody got any questions so far? No? Good? So what does it look like? So you want to develop what we call an organizational mindset, which means that everyone thinks the same way. Everyone looks at their business the same way. So we create what we call like a hive mind, as opposed to all these people running around with all these individual ideas, and we need to learn to approach things like skills and capacity in a very, very different way. So you want to promote growth in your organization by getting them to learn. It's not something you can force them to do. So you ease off with the rules. You make everything voluntary. And what begins to happen is it turns into an organism. If you create rules and say they're mandatory, that's a mechanism. That's not an organism. If you make them voluntary, everyone can move around where they want, when they want, how they want, and the players that are on your team will arrive at the meetings, will arrive at the trainings, will arrive exactly where you want them to be, and the ones that don't, well, they're not on your team. You let them show who they are. You let it reveal itself. And what it does, the people that do turn up get more done because why? They're operating in the same vibe. They're on the same vibration. They're operating at the same frequency. And the people that don't come to the meetings are not. That's why it happens. But what we do in an organization, we force everyone into a room and say, you guys get in there and solve it. It's all going to work out. Don't worry. Right? Step back and just let it be what it is. And what it does, the people who are not at the meetings and the trainings will leave the company, and you'll attract new people, guess what? Like the people who are at your meetings. Because that's the vibe they're sending out. That's a signal they're sending out. So continuous learning practice is basically how we want to go with everything. Like, effort's got like a really bad rap. We always think effort's like something you got to do and push, and it's difficult and it's hard and all the rest of it. Like, applying effort to something that you like, well, it's relatively easy. Like, if you really like it, you'll apply more effort. But it leads to mastery. Like, even the ideas of, like, you know, we say 10,000 hours to master something. Do you reckon that's true in today's world? I think one of the things that was really interesting about, like, something that came up in one of the talks that I did, or one of the seminars that I did, was when you learn to master something, yeah? Like, for example, you go to university, you get a good job, and then you come out and you become this profession. I'm this profession, and I've spent 10,000 hours mastering this. But that's not what you mastered. Yeah? You mastered mastering something. That's what you mastered. So you can apply that to any single thing that you want, because you pushed yourself and made yourself learn in a way that you actually pushed something to the point where you mastered it. And that's the process that you've learned. And understand that process can be used for anything, in any direction, and you're not confined to this one thing, and I can only do this and I can only do that. Mastery and practice is the process. Understand whether you build a website in today's world and you put it online, that website is not something that you build and fix and done and it's online. It's a process. Understand that your company is a process, and as processes require new development, new innovation, new ideas, new inspiration. If you approach every single thing that you do in your life as a process that can be improved, it will. So, challenge. We say, oh, it's tough, it's hard. Or, my fear is. These are all limits in terms of your language. If you say the challenge is, as opposed to the problem is, it creates a different type of energy in the organization. But we don't. We go, the problem is this, the problem is that, and we have meetings about problems. Let's get in the room and talk about these problems and these issues, and let's put these problems in a report. Let's email them around so everyone knows the problems, and let's talk about the problems. You want to talk about problems? A few more? And what do you think that creates? More problems. Whatever you focus your energy on, it will expand. Right? Simple. So if you're putting problems in reports, then you're definitely expanding. So my idea for you guys is, if you deal with the issues or the things that come up, or the areas of innovation, which sounds a lot better, as they come up, and you deal with them on the spot, you don't need to mention them again in a report or having a meeting about them. But because of the way that company is structured, we can't do that yet. Why? Because I need to go on the mission, I need to have a meeting about it and discuss it with my peers and my boss, and maybe I can change it. Whereas if you imagine a company that's based on a set of core values that's being lived every single day, what happens is the people in the organization can actually make the decisions. Why? Because they're living the values. They're in alignment with the values. So all the decision making is distributed. The authority is distributed through the entire company at different levels. Yeah, there's a tiny bit of hierarchy when you go through this process, but eventually the playing field is flat. You get rid of hierarchy completely, and you distribute the authority across everyone. So if I live the values and you live the values, why can I not make the decisions? Because I'm coming from the same space as you. I look at the organization in the same way as you. I have the same mindset as you. The meetings, you go in and you have the meetings because everyone's on the same page with the same values, the same vision, and the same mission, then the decision making is done. And it gets easier and easier and easier to run the business. But the complexity of today's business is that the hierarchy, people are being told what to do all of the time when everyone disagrees. And this is why things become very, very difficult to move forward with. So failure doesn't have to define you. Yeah, it's part of the process. So another paradigm shift is, if you think about this logically, if there was no failure, how would we grow? How would we learn? How would we move forward? How would we innovate? How would we get better at things? We wouldn't. So yet we give failure the shittiest rap possible, and we blame everyone. You should be running around high-fiving everyone saying, thanks for pointing it out, man. It's a hole in the system. So you should learn to celebrate failure as opposed to blame someone for it. It's the most essential part of any business. Identifying the cracks, but if someone blows something up for you, you're going, oh, I didn't realize that, and let's go and fix that. There's always areas. The interesting thing about things that go on in a company, there's a term called culture hacking. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. So if you look at an organization and the things that are happening in the environment are the symptoms of something. So rather than look at that and say, oh, let's figure out what's going on, all you do is you pull the team aside and you ask them a completely different question about what happened. And you say, can you guys tell me what's frustrating you today or this week or this month? And then when they tell you what's frustrating them, you'll see that there's a direct correlation to what just happened. And then you innovate that. You don't try and fix the symptoms all the time. So, feedback. As we go through life, one of the skills that you can develop that's going to help you along is listening, which you pointed out at the beginning. If someone's giving you feedback about yourself, yeah, I can guarantee you one thing about that feedback, is it's true. It doesn't matter who's telling you, where they're telling you, whatever anyone says about you, it's true. In some dimension, it's true. And the more you can absorb that feedback rather than deflect it, you can actually grow, you can change, if you're really listening. But our egos have this amazing mechanism to have selective hearing when it comes to feedback about ourselves, because we don't want to hear the stuff that we don't want to hear, right? So if there's a skill that's going to help you a long way, is take advantage of the feedback. It's like free education, free lessons. And what I've learned through life is, like, at the beginning, you're peppered by life. There's so much going on, and it's crazy, and you don't know how to make sense of anything. But as you go through life and you start to make better decisions, and you start listening, and you absorb the feedback that's going on, you can adjust and you can grow. I call it learn, pivot, grow. And the more you do this, the amazing thing about it is you're developing this amazing skill to listen to the feedback that's coming in. And then when you get so good at it, do you know what happens? There's no one there. The feedback is very, very infrequent because you've listened so much to all the feedback that's come in that you've grown to the point where you're the one giving the advice, you're the one giving the teachings. And if you do that, it's a very, very quick way to go rather than resist everything. And it gives you a very good bird's eye view of your business. So there's a quote here by Sir Winston Churchill, and I think it's very, very poignant. And he says that feedback is like pain in the body. It lets you know when something's off. Right? If it's there for a reason. Yeah, you just got to figure out what that reason is why am I being told this? Why does this keep going on? And if you resist the feedback, when the pain will remain. And it'll continue to perpetuate through your life until you don't get it. And most people die with this stuff. Yeah, they die without really listening to what's going on and look at life. Because everything's coming from you, for you. In a business, it's scaled in a way that you cannot imagine. Yeah, what a business is putting out and what's coming in, and you look at what it's creating. It's like you go online. Like Facebook's one of my favorite topics at the moment, about how they're busy robbing everyone, stealing money from everyone all over the world. And you look at the type of feedback that's coming into the organization about how everyone's talking about it as well, and you go, no, they're definitely not doing it. The feedback's there for a reason. So it's just about listening and kind of getting out of your own way and taking it on board and learning from it. I want to talk about trust, because this is let's call it the primary ingredient of getting an organization to work. So as I said at the beginning about culture, if I could ask you, what is trust? Charlie, what's trust for you? Faith? Okay. Trust? Relying on someone? Okay. What about you? Okay. Trust? Belief? Okay, so remember at the beginning when I talked about culture? Trust, and the really interesting thing about this word is the reason that no one can describe it is because most people never feel it. And I said, feel it. It's a feeling. Okay? Trust is purely a feeling. Now, the journey of working with like the value model and looking at a value-driven organization and really getting involved with it, the thing that really startled me about like this trust thing was, as people, right, the more you work with your energy, the more you work with yourself and the clearer you get as a person, what naturally begins to happen is you begin to emanate values. So values are the ingredients for trust. Like open communication will lead to trust. Transparency will lead to trust. Integrity, honesty, all of these things will lead to trust. So if you know someone is open, honest, transparent, they've got good ethics, and so on and so forth, you'll trust that. But you know, someone who's saying it and doing it, well, that's two different things. So the more you work with values, one of the biggest things that really I got from living values and being in that space with it and really spending time on living a set of values was the gift that you get is authenticity, because you're really saying and doing the same thing. And you don't have that voice in your head. You're not bothered at night, someone poking you going, oh, you know, you should do that. You're not. Right? You're being bothered. You're like, if you've got something going on in your mind at night, it's usually the things that you said you were going to do and you didn't. And you're not living up to your own expectations. The second that you become aligned with your values, then you get that gift of authenticity, which is oneness, which is not this duality thing, noise going on in your head. So the idea is to try and get this going in a company. So people don't trust because of risk of failure, the fear. They've got all this stuff going on. There's a lot of subconscious levels. And, you know, part of it is just because of the lack of self-esteem. Yeah. They really don't feel like they're worthy in some way. And the level of uncertainty in life, the only thing that you can really be certain of is uncertainty. That's a guarantee that things are going to evolve in a way that you don't know what's going to happen. And I think Alan Watts said, you know, relax, nothing is under control. And as long as you're good with that, and really I'm being deadly serious, in a business, you don't know what's going to come in the door. You don't know what's going to happen on that day. You don't know what's going to happen next week. So if you can live with that uncertainty and develop skill with it and ability with it and what I call capacity, then you've got half a shot. So it's the core component of how an organization works. It's how things tick. Like if you understand one very simple thing, there's something called the 3-tier model of change. 3 very simple steps. The first one is energy. Okay? The more energy that you have and the more consistent you are, what it does is it develops trust. So like, I'll give you an example. If you are a leader and you go into work every day and one day you're happy, one day you're mad, one day you're sad, one day you're crying, and then you're happy again, and then you're sad, and then you've got this rhythm going on, do you think your team are going to trust you? Why? Because you're not consistent. But if you bring the same game every day consistently, you know that decision-making process of doing the same thing over and over every single day, over time, what it does it begins to form trust because you're consistent. I can rely on consistency. I can rely on that energy. So one of the things in the hospitality industry is like when people don't do something and they go, do it again, do it. And I said, look, man, after 10 times, it's probably not the fact that he can't do the task. It's because he doesn't trust your consistency of your energy. So really the leaders, they're not really working on teaching how to do things. It's more about working on being consistent as a leader, being consistent as a person, being consistent with your word, being in alignment with your word. Once you do that, your team kind of follow and do the things that are required as opposed to you needing to tell them what to do. And it takes a lot of work. So a few shifts for you, like a few different ways to look at things in a values-driven model. So if I look at like costs and assets, for example. So we look at costs as things that need to be paid, value of material, time consumed, etc., etc. Now, to be honest, most businesses around the world look at everything as a cost. Every single thing that goes on in their mind is a cost. But then we've got like an asset, which is an investment, future benefit for the company, and things that are going to continuously bring something that's good for the business, right? This is what we call an asset. Now, if you look at our terminology for things, like HR, remember the cost, resources, exploitation, burnout, we dispose of, we throw away. Like, human beings are not resources, but yet we call it HR. And they're the people that are supposed to look after us, right? If we call them human assets, that changes the game around the people almost immediately. Would you pay an asset a minimum wage? No. What do you do with assets? You look after them, you grow them, you cultivate them, you take care of them. But we don't. We call them resources, HR. And you wonder why things go wrong. It looks very like the workforce of the world, right? But that one shift, but then what it does, the second that you make that paradigm shift from HR to HA or to human assets, all of the language that's in that entire department will change. Everything, every conversation, every contract, every procedure, everything that goes on is when you make that shift. And we begin to look at the team in a completely different way. Why? Because what did we do? Remember the two key ingredients? Communication and cooperation. We're communicating with language in a very, very different way. So we want to focus on a very different set of things in an organization. All right? Does anybody understand what capacity really is? You know, we talk about skills, we talk about attitude. And that was an interesting study where skills are really not something that's that important. You know, the top organizations around the world did a survey across, I think it was the top 100 companies in their Fortune 500 list, the first 100. And they asked them to provide a list of characteristics for an employee, the best characteristics. And from that 100 companies, there was 117 characteristics that were brought back across the 100 companies. And then they split them into two columns, skills and attitudes. How many do you think were in the skills column out of the 117? 7. 7 out of 117. So 110 were all attitude based. Now, what's interesting is there's a third dimension which is overlooked even by the Fortune 500. The skills and attitudes only work if you have the capacity to continue with your skills and attitude when something goes wrong. So my view on business is it's not about like creating a team when everything's going right. It's creating a team when everything's going wrong. You know, your worst nightmare in Kotal, the rain's pouring in through the windows, the customers are going bonkers, the kitchen blows up, everything's on fire. Your worst scenario, you want a team that can cope, has the capacity to deal with everything when it's going wrong, not when it's going right. Going right, it's like you're busy drinking champagne, it's like, woo, everything's working perfectly. But the economy collapses, then where's your skills and your attitude then? You need capacity for that. And that's what this is about, it's developing capacity. I get divorced from my wife, my father dies. Do they still have the capacity to deal with it in a mature way, be open to it? Or do their skills and attitude go out the window? So I want you guys to start really thinking about creating a safe environment, because if you think about one of the primary drivers of innovation, or the primary driver for innovation, is safety. So does anybody know the Chrysler story? Yeah. So they brought this guy in, and it was basically the company was far from doing well, and they thought this guy was going to come up with the latest and greatest advertising campaign or the newest way to run the business and all these amazing ideas. And he basically came up with a safety program. And he goes, I'm going to make this the safest car manufacturer in America. And everyone thought he was mental. But it then became the #1 car manufacturer in America. And it was because that innovation, if people feel safe, they become more creative. They will innovate. They'll try harder because they have a safe environment. And that doesn't necessarily mean about as in you feel safe from being trapped in a machine, but all types of safety in a group, being able to speak up, being able to share your intimate feelings. So a value-driven model, if you live a set of values, what it does, it puts a company into what I call a constant state of innovation. There is no refresh, rebrand, whatever. It just evolves. So a restaurant, if they really get a value model, when you go away from a restaurant, you come back in 1 year, it won't look like anything like it did. Whereas before, 3 years was around the story, right? And then you have to kind of rebrand and do a makeover and stuff like that. But if you think about a business that makes small incremental changes all of the time in every dimension, from decor, menus, plates, cups, whatever it is, the way they serve, then that business doesn't need to rebrand anything because it's constantly rebranding every single second of the day. And this is where business really needs to be. And there's one other organism that does that, and that's nature. It's constantly evolving. Why would we create something that's fixed and go, I've finished, it's done? That's a very old paradigm of business. But we don't. We run it the same way, year after year after year, and we do I've got a new SOP. Sorted. It doesn't work. If you think about a larger scale of everything, and the way that you do this is not how you think. You don't do it. The culture does. You allow feedback to come the other way. So you've got the staff, the leaders, and the marketplace, and you listen. The feedback that comes in from those 3 dimensions all of the time is the sweet spot for where you innovate. And you really listen, and you really listen hard. Because if you're not pleasing all 3 of those people, then you don't have a business. This is where the balance comes from. Yep. So I'm going to give you guys a quick look at what a high-performance culture looks like once it's kind of got rolling out. So we start off with what's something called a default culture, which is all the leaders get together, or the managers, and all their subconscious values, which are usually all rubbish because they come from different parts of the world. There's some good in there. There's a lot of stuff going on in the basement, and it creates what's called a default culture. Everyone's unhappy. They're being screwed over. They're being paid minimum wage, and they're doing all of these things, and the company's locked in survival mode. Self-interest, decision-making, so on. Some default cultures are better than others. You might be lucky and some of the leaders have got better values or better upbringing, but typically majority of business are operating in extremely high levels of self-interest and they're not really thinking beyond themselves. So what we do, just flick it on, we basically create a culture where we get a set of values locked in place at the beginning. But even the values can change. Yeah? Values can move around as the company grows because it may need certain things. Like when we build a cultural resilience plan for a business. Like one of the interesting things is if there's an economic collapse, value-driven organizations actually thrive, which is even more amazing because they have a relationship with the society and the community. So even though the economy goes down, these businesses actually go up because of their preferred employers, their preferred companies to go, or their preferred restaurants. So you've got to constantly move everything all of the time and let your culture grow by not having too many rules and constraints, by allowing the values to really drive the organization, have a super clear mission and vision about the direction of the business. So another name for these types of cultures is called a push culture. Yeah, but they're always pushing for innovation. They're always pushing for change. Like they promote excellence. There's an interesting project that I've got kind of on the back burner, which is a social media model. So the social media model of the world, like Facebook, Instagram, all that, it's done. It's toast. It's self-interest. It's an advertising platform. It doesn't contribute to the extent where it's actually poisonous, what it brings to the world. So a social media model that promotes excellence is really what's needed. That promotes like where garbage can't be just put up there for money. And that's really what a lot of these advertising platforms do. If you promote excellence in any area of your business or any area of your life, what you'll find is it thrives. That's all you've got to do, is you've got to constantly make the guys in your team or your office better. Show them that you care. Bring new ideas in. Like study for 30 minutes before you go into the work in the morning to create a better meeting. And bring new ideas into work every single day. And make them thrive. So the biggest thing, or the biggest shift really, is the worldview. So my company, my view of what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get businesses to impact the environment directly. Because we're part of it. We're part of the story. Like the idea of the environment not being in the books of a business because of how fast and how big business has grown is absurd. Like everything that we do produces a carbon footprint, but yet we're not charged for it. Yeah, and because of the system that we have in place, the financial system is flawed. I'm not suggesting even going and giving the money to a separate organization. I'm actually talking about just getting out and going and doing it. Imagine every business in the world took 1% of the net profit of their business every month and literally put it in the road. Literally, not figuratively, literally. You know, fixed whatever needed to be fixed, cleaned up, trash, did whatever. Every business in the world was doing that every month. 1% within a year, the world would be clean. Rather than giving the money to a centralized organization and the money goes to wherever it goes. Like the decentralization of the world is really the answer. Decentralization of money, decentralization of power, decentralization of even the internet. The internet was designed to be free, but yet we're being charged. If I want to get something out across the internet, Facebook or Google or one of those big entities will charge me to display my information across our... So there's a technology called Bitcoin, which is based on a decentralized network. Imagine the internet decentralized, where you could just put your information out and everyone could read it. There's no big bottlenecks of where the information could go, and it becomes a worldview. If you start thinking about something beyond yourselves and you start looking at the environment. So one of the interesting exercises, especially with the bigger companies, I'll say, how long is your business view, or how long is your projection for your business in terms of cash projections, all that kind of stuff? And they go, oh yeah, pretty far, 5, 10 years. I said, try 100, try 150 years of what does your business look like? You're not building a business, you're building a legacy. Right, and that's what we don't have. Our focus is so short term about what am I going to get in 5 years or 10 years. It tells you everything about where the organization's at. If you have a 100-year view, then you give a shit. Then you really think about what's going to happen, what you're leaving behind for your kids, for all the rest of it. This is one of the interesting things about the Chinese. So I've looked a lot into Chinese history. They don't do anything without a 100-year plan. 150, 500-year plan, right? Because they understand like change, they understand growth, they understand that things need time to come into play. And the way that we go about things is we live in the world of gratification, yeah, which is instant. We don't look for satisfaction anymore in things. I want this now to make me feel better because, for whatever reason. If you start planning a longer view, what's really interesting about this exercise is it instantly increases the size of your company. Why would it do that? If I wanted to plan something next week, okay, I've got a 1 week view of my company. How many things do you think can manifest in a week? How much energy do you think can come in there? How many possibilities? Few. But if you put a 100-year plan down, a 100-year view of your company, the world moves for that. The earth moves for that. Of what's possible that could come in to align up for you to allow those steps to come into play. Now, not many people tell you to go and make a 100-year business plan, but this is very interesting to put into play. What's really important is when you hire companies, like resumes and all of that, like they don't really work. You want to be hiring via value, emotional intelligence, yeah, as opposed to, intellectual intelligence. You want to be looking at things that they're doing in terms of like really looking at what they spend their time doing. Do they go to the gym? Do they meditate? Do they do yoga? What is their diet like? These are the things that you want to hire by as opposed to what's on their resume. Because you put skills together it doesn't really gel. You put people with a common mind or a common like or some sort of alignment around what they view life about in the same environment, and they'll work together, and you'll just find things flow easier. So, but what they do have is they have a zero tolerance for cultural integrity. Like, if you're not living the values, then you're out. You've got to get on board, and it's a non-argument. Like, okay, I would like you to be a good person. I'd like you to be a better person. No, I don't want to do that. Then it makes sense that you wouldn't employ that person. Naturally, over time, what happens is, as a company grows, and the more you push the value model, and the more it becomes what we call cohesive, those people naturally leave anyway. The hiring, firing process begins to disappear over time. So, energy. Profit comes from energy. If your team have got really low energy, then they've got really bad productivity and they've got really bad efficiency, so therefore you'll have really bad profits. So if you start to really focus on these factors with your team, like get into their diets, get into their rhythm, their routine, all the things that they're doing, and really focus on making them as energetic as possible, what you'll find is your company and the decision making around the business will change. The vibration of the company will change, and it'll start to attract more business, more talent, and things get easier. Yep, you got a question? Start small, like as in, there's a little method called Kaizen, which is basically little bets. So the fastest way you can change the energy of a team is by getting them to replace the evening meal with liquid. Smoothie, soup, or a juice or something for a week collectively. And when they come into work, the first few days, the first thing that they'll notice is that they wake up with a lot more energy. So no, you make it like a 7-day challenge, and you create like a program or a test or something, and you put a reward. Right, we're going to do this, an energy challenge for the office, and we'll see what kind of result that's going to come out of it. So, and you get everyone in, you get everyone charged, and you get everyone to agree, sign a document, whatever it is that you need to do, get them on the same page, build some commitment towards doing it, and then the 7-day challenge is off, or the 30-day challenge, or whichever one you want to do. And what you'll find is, at the beginning, people are so resistant to any kind of change whatsoever. But if you set them up something small for them to achieve at the beginning, and they achieve it, I can guarantee you they'll want to do more, for 2 reasons. 1, they achieved it, and 2, because they feel better. So the more you practice that with your team, the little bets, the little achievements, they feel good, and you can kind of celebrate that stuff. So the reward is them just having more energy and coming to work and beginning to enjoy their job, and new levels of creativity and productivity are going to start pouring in. But you have to walk the talk more than anyone in that company. You've got to be the one to come in and bring the thunder every day. Yeah. So it's super important to get them to do it individually, but it's very important to do it collectively as well. So if you think about your team, you know, the area that you've got outside your office there, you could get everyone out in the morning and do 15 minutes of exercise together. You know why the army marches the soldiers, why they march around forever and ever and ever? 1, because it's really good team building, but it creates synchronicity, and it gets them on the same vibration all of the time, and it gets them fit. It increases their energy levels, and they begin to operate. When you march for a long time in the same group, you begin to sense everyone around you. So whatever team building exercises that you do, get the team more and more in sync rather than just be in work. So like with anything, you want to hit it from as many different sides as you can. Hit them with many different modalities and get them to do it as a team. And what you find is the energy of the company goes up and up, and these deals that kind of sometimes get stuck will just start to come through. Their belief will go up. So there's 2 things that are going to happen once you start working on this. Like, you can't get these to happen without the right energy in the company. 1 is what we call internal cohesion. Does anybody know that word, by the way? Cohesion. Like the word adhesive, right? It means that they come together like a glue. And you'll find that like they start working as a team as opposed to just a group of people in a room, where they start like anticipating each other in conversation, yeah, in words, in action. And they start picking up on what each other does. They start learning each other's roles and start filling in the blank spots and stuff like that. Now, this is internally. over time, what they found is a value-driven organization with a strong set of values will actually begin to affect the community around it. So if you get one really good company behind this, that's big enough, you can impact millions of people's lives by just training a business, because that education is spilling out into the community, and they start attracting community relations. They start doing projects. So the idea of like SCR, social corporate responsibility, is always based in the idea of like, I give money to a charity. Well done. That's not really it. Like, this is social corporate responsibility, where a company is actually affecting the community in a positive manner right across the board. Now we're cooking on gas. No, I'm giving more money to the financial system that doesn't work. It's not in their field of consciousness. Yeah, I'm doing it because the world says I have to. Do we have a SCR program? Okay, good. And that's it. That's the field there. But understand that your business needs to be integrated in the community, part of it, like not separate from it, fully integrated, as in like an organism. There has to be a symbiotic relationship there with the community. And you won't have to go and find something to be part of as a charity. It will come to you. It'll automatically happen. But you've got to do the work by getting the alignment with the values. So there's two elements of cooperation that you need to focus on. If you want to make any business work better, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a restaurant, an architecture company, any type of business, is work on the behavior and the language. Focus on those two areas, the communication and the cooperation. Like, you've really got to think about, how does this work? How do we get these people to work together in a better way? How are we being together as opposed to what are we doing together? Because that's the old story. The doing part, I think we've done globally. We've done it to death, literally. Yeah. If we can get away from that and start to look at how we're being, things are going to move in an easier way. So that's what the goal is, for me at least anyway, is to get people who have a business to start looking beyond their business, beyond themselves, and start impacting the environment. If you think about right now, one of the world hot topics is the environment. It's a very good thing to be aligned with, energetically. Yeah, if your company's vision doesn't have the environment in it in some way, then you're missing the boat. You're just going to fall away and wither and die. So my goal is just to kind of educate people and say, like, you need to adjust your view, you need to adjust your vision to doing something greater, to being part of something greater. Like the expression that you've got in your business with the designs and stuff like that, it's already in that view, but think even further beyond that. And I think things will change. The type of people that are going to come in want to work with you. There's a phenomenon online, very interesting. When a consumer comes to a website and they go on the website, what they do before they buy something from you or contact you even, what they do is they click on every link on the website. What are they doing? No, they're trying to find out who you are. They're trying to find out what you do. They're trying to find out what your vision is. They're trying to find out, are you giving back? Consumers are really aware of this. Really, really aware of this. And this phenomena is increasing more and more online, that people are making decisions based on something that's not about the product. It's based on who you are. So essentially what's happened, the paradigm shift is basically this. Branding was, this logo thing, the story, the punchline, and all the rest of it. The culture is the brand. The strength of a culture in an organization is what the brand stands for, the core values. The brand values are the expression of that. So maybe one of your brand values is a keen focus on customer experience. As a core value, you can express excellence through a keen focus on customer experience. So it's this shift that we're trying to make of understanding that the culture will be any strategy, will be any business plan, anything by a country mile. Like, I'll just give you an idea. Value-driven organizations outperform the S&P index, Dow Jones, FTSE, all of that by a country mile. Over a 10-year period, they'll produce around 1,500% more revenue. That's how powerful they are. But there's a very small percentage of the world have the ability to move to it because everyone else is selfish. It's me, my money, and I, and what can I get? And this is consciousness that we're dealing with. You can't be suddenly more conscious. You have to do it in increments. So the model that we use is 7 levels of consciousness. So I'm going to leave you with 5 things that you can do to kind of maintain change when you're when you're doing this. So I want you to think about the motivations and the reasons why you want to change. Yeah, whatever that is. I suggest if you're in business or you're thinking about opening a business or you're doing any kind of consultancy work or anything like that, I would definitely look more at this than anything else than you've ever done in the past, because within 10 years, any business that's not using this model will be very, very, very unlikely to be in business, because the world's level of consciousness is rapidly rising. People go into a company and they go, I don't know why I don't like that place. It's got a weird vibe. Don't know. But the reason what they're saying is that vibration, the feeling, the culture. If people are unhappy working there, that's what people are beginning to really feel more than ever. So the more you look at that, the more it'll unfold. So you have just go back. A steady focus on purpose. Really push the purpose of your company. That's why I'm saying if you've got a 5-year view of just making some money, then there's not really much purpose. What is the purpose? Think of something like beyond yourself. Okay, you need a lot of self-discipline and commitment to making this change, to maintain the rhythm with your team, with your company. Most businesses are very rigid. There's no flexibility. So whatever plan that you create or whatever idea that you create, don't get attached to it. Let it evolve. Let it change. Yeah, where you'll end up is definitely not where you start. Like whatever it is that you set out to do, when it comes to the other end of the spectrum, when your business finally comes online, you start getting into the market, it's not what it looked like at the beginning. So let it become that, rather than, oh no, it has to be this way, and I'm so attached. You've got people who are still stuck on their logo after 3 months of being in the startup. And the most important part for me is the continuous learning. You want to be spending an hour a day, every day, learning something new, being engaged with something new, bringing new insights into your organization, and learning how to become more conscious and self-aware with all of this stuff. It just takes a little bit of time. It just takes a bit of time for you to get used to this. I'll leave you with one last thing. When you move to a value-driven model, most businesses in the world have one of two approaches. The first approach is what we call the hard approach, which is the mechanical approach, which is the books, the numbers, the bums on seats, all of that kind of stuff. That's the hard approach, managing the tasks, time and task management. The soft approach is managing the emotions, is managing the mindset, all the rest of it. Some businesses have a go at meshing the two, but it always goes a bit pear-shaped. So what I suggest, the way that you operate this, you leave everything the way it is. And the more that you begin to focus on the intangibles of the business, which is the soft, right? Really go into the soft. What you do is you don't try and get them to work together, because that won't work, because it creates friction. What you do is you let the hard fall away. You let the systems and processes reveal themselves that they're no good because of the feedback that's coming in. More and more staff will come and say, this doesn't work. And you go, cool, get rid of it. You don't do it off the back of one person. But if that feedback begins to come in more and more, then you know that thing is in the way. So you either innovate it or you discard it. Now, one of the interesting things about business, it's based on something called legacy. So you go, oh, why do you do that? This is the first question I always ask them. Why do you do what you do? And you go, no, John told me. And I go, well, I'll go and see John. John, why do you do that? No, Fred told me. And I go, some dude called Eric told me he used to work here 2 years ago that we're going to do this thing. And you go back, and there's no reason why they do this thing apart from someone told them. There's no valid reason. And offices and businesses are full of it. And you go, okay, let's not do that anymore. So 50% of an organization's time is doing something that was handed down through legacy. So we don't look at this stuff. So this is all the stuff that will fall away. The second that you allow people to speak up, give feedback, listen to the feedback, and go, wow, this keeps coming up, that this thing's broken or doesn't work or in the way, this is always a problem, and innovate that, get rid of it, throw it away, and put in something new. And what you'll find at the end of the process of addressing the soft, the hard will restructure itself, or self-organize is the word that I'm trying to get to. The organism at the very beginning that I spoke about. It's no longer mechanic. It's literally, it will change. And the more that you manage the soft, just manage the soft, the hard will organize itself. That's a fair ways down the line. But you do, and it does it at the speed it can. So The small impacts that you make with your team, their mindset, their energy, by changing the values, the more it unfolds in a way where the business, over time, will actually run itself. You don't need to do anything anymore. You can sit on the beach with your newspaper and enjoy your margarita, you know? Does anybody have any questions? I've got 10 minutes for a Q&A of any kind. Nope? Good. I did my job. Thank you. Huh?